people coming in from the sessions, but since we have a very tight schedule, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. So thank you for coming to Lawrence Technological University this morning. I hope you're having a very invigorating sessions so far today. And I'm only going to be very quick here. My name is Patrick Nelson. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I first want to thank Dr. Bhattacharya for putting this together, because I know these are enormously a lot of work to do something to make it very successful. And with that, I'm going to introduce our provost, Dr. Richard Heiss, to come up here and give a brief introduction.
Thanks, Patrick. Seems the emphasis is on brief. All right. Well, first of all, on behalf of the university and also the president, Dr. Tarek Sob, and the provost's office, I'm really pleased to be able to offer you a very warm welcome here on this very nice Michigan sunny day. Sometimes it happens a little bit, you see it now and then. But we're really pleased to have you with us and to have this Michigan Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters back on the campus. I understand the last time it was here, it was curtailed by this pandemic that we're still paying the price for, and we will be probably into the next few years. So it's good to have you back, and I'm glad we were able to do this here on campus. So let me take this opportunity to share with you a few words about this institution, about Lawrence Technological University. We're a highly technologically focused university. Technology is infused in literally everything that we do. I like to say it's in our DNA, and it's been that way since our founding in 1932 by George and Russell Lawrence. Our motto, theory and practice, really originated with those founders, and in fact it continues to be a foundational principle in guiding everything we do today, theory and practice. Our tagline that we use now, be curious, make magic, reflects the kinds of students, faculty, and staff that are attracted to this institution, their innovative and entrepreneurial mindset, and what it is that they actually accomplish, make magic, while they're here on campus. Our vision, to be the university that transforms lives, concise and to the point, and it is true. We're one of actually a very small, of the order of a dozen universities in the United States that are comprehensive, independent, doctoral, and technology focused by vision, mission, and by name. It's a very small number of institutions like Lawrence Tech. We embrace 5 pillars that support all that we do and that reflect who we really are. Technological eminence, a research and creative practice focus, industry immersion, interdisciplinary agility, and professional excellence. And we have 5 colleges that make up this really interesting institution. In chronological order from our founding, we have the College of Engineering, the College of Business and Information Technology, which used to be the College of Management, but upgraded its name a number of years ago, the College of Architecture and Design, the College of Arts and Science, and just recently, as of July of last year, our College of Health Sciences. So finally, let me share with you that we are, in fact, a very dynamic university. We're growing through a transition by moving from an M1 to an R2 university with a strong increased focus on high-quality PhD level research designed to grow our academic reputation while continuously sharpening and expanding our well-respected expertise in teaching. By way of some acknowledgments and appreciation, I do take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the members of the organizing committee for this conference, Professors Bhattacharya, Johnston, Pappas, and Timmons, and you'll get to meet and interact with all of them during the conference, as well as all of our sponsors and their hard work and dedication in pulling this thing together. It's no mean task. It's not a trivial task to pull something like this together and make it be successful. So I appreciate the effort expended, and the fact that you were all able to come and join us here today. And I really do encourage everyone to fully engage during all the conference programs and take advantage of these opportunities to network, to share ideas, and to build collaborations across these many disciplines, 31 different sessions and opportunities here for you to do that. So in closing, and to continue to be brief, I'm really pleased to extend my warmest wish to all the participants here for a very productive and enjoyable conference experience. I really do hope that the conference sparks new ideas, innovative research, directions, and interdisciplinary collaborations that lead to growth and your future success in all your endeavors. So I'll take this opportunity now to introduce Professor Bhattacharya from our College of Arts and Science here to the podium to deliver the Maisel President's Note. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Heist, for this warm welcome address. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bhuja Bhattacharya. I'm an associate professor of physics here at Lawrence Tech. It is my great honor and privilege to serve also as the current president of the Michigan Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters. With pleasure, I welcome you to our campus for this year's annual conference. As the president of Maisel, it is my duty to acknowledge the contributions of many individuals who make this conference a success every year, especially this year. Foremost among them is Director Jesse DeHaan. Please join me in acknowledging Jesse's efforts in making this year's conference a success. Next, please join me in acknowledging the contributions of the executive committee members. Committee members, if you're here, please stand and be acknowledged. The Academy houses more than 30 sections. Section presentations and other business is run by section chairs, vice chairs, and co-chairs. They deserve our sincere thanks. Section chairs and vice chairs and co-chairs, please stand and be acknowledged. One of the cornerstones of academic endeavors is publication. The Michigan Academy embodies this spirit through its journal, the Michigan Academician, which publishes articles after thorough peer review. As fields of research become broad and interconnected, now more than ever, the Academician is looking for expert reviewers. We request section chairs to volunteer to review articles, as well as to recommend their expert colleagues to review articles submitted to the Academician. The Academy is also looking for host institutions for the annual conference for 2025 and beyond. Please get in touch with Jesse DeHaan, whom you may have met at the registration desk, for more information about the journal, the conference, and to express your interest in reviewing or bringing this amazing conference to your backyard next year. The Michigan Academy offers the opportunity for 2 awards each year. First, the Cohn Prize in Law and Public Policy. This award is for the paper that best contributes to existing scholarly literature on the topic of law or public policy. The winner is awarded $500 and an opportunity to publish their paper in the Academician. Second, the CAP Award for the outstanding undergraduate paper from the previous conference. The award consists a plaque and $100 plus recognition at the Academy luncheon. Now, I wear multiple hats today. In addition to serving as the president of the Academy, it's my pleasure to serve as the host institution liaison for this year's conference. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the folks who have made this year's conference a reality on the Lawrence Tech side. My colleagues, George Pappas, Matthew Johnston, Shannon Timmons, were instrumental in shaping this year's conference. The Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Patrick Nelson, provided invaluable support. Sherry Frost from the Dean's Office, Monica Lewis from our catering service, Derek Thornton from our Facilities Department, Norman, Anthony, and Sam from our AV support, and above all, students, staff, and faculty volunteers who have made this event possible deserve a big round of applause. Last but not least, I want to thank Catherine Roy from the Provost's office and Provost Richard Heist himself, who you met moments ago, for their continued support and enthusiasm in bringing this conference to the LTU campus. Thank you. Now, I'd like to call upon my colleague, Matthew Johnston, to introduce today's keynote speaker. Matthew.
Great, thank you, Bujo, and thanks everyone for being here. It is my tremendous pleasure to introduce the conference's keynote speaker, Professor Scott Gerald Shaw. Professor Shaw received his Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Cincinnati and his Master's of Architecture from Tulane before going on to serve as an assistant professor at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and Temple University. He joined the faculty of the College of Architecture and Design here at Lawrence Tech in 2012, where he has since served as chair of the Department of Architecture and associate dean of the college, among other roles. He was also recently and deservedly promoted from associate to full professor. Professor Shaw's contributions to the field of architecture and socially responsive design have been profound. His work has appeared in over 30 exhibits around the world, including at such renowned institutions as the Zeitz Museum for Contemporary African Art in Cape Town, the San Francisco Museum of Art in La Paz, the American Institute of Architects Center for Architecture in Philadelphia, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. He's been invited to give dozens of keynote lectures, including for the American Institute of Architects, the University of Maryland, and the Pratt Institute, and has published almost 40 peer-reviewed articles on topics ranging from the misalignment between environmentalism and patronage-based practice, to emerging technologies in home construction, to guerrilla design. But even as I mention these multitudes of accomplishments, I cannot help but feel my focus is misplaced, because Professor Shaw's work is rarely focused on himself, but on his service to others. His passion is his community. He is the founding principal in the architectural practice HOME, spelled H-O-U-M, which aims to make housing more affordable, sustainable, and beautiful by combining the promise of generative design, digital fabrication, and industrial scale manufacturing. The project is currently constructing 2 homes in the Detroit area with an aim to come 35 to 45% below construction cost averages. Shaw is also the founding director of the International Design Clinic, a registered nonprofit that realizes crowdsourced architecture and virally propagated creative action with communities in need around the world. Since founding the IDC in 2006, Shaw has worked through this organization to complete over 24 projects on 5 continents, including an urban tent for the homeless made of reclaimed water bottles, a vision for education based upon borrowed resources for the migrant communities in India, and a $2 water filtration system. Professor Shaw's relentless pursuit of innovative solutions and commitment to community empowerment truly embodies the spirit of architectural excellence. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Scott Shaw.
Well, first of all, thank you. The generosity of that introduction, I can only hope I measure up to that. I also want to thank the organizers of this conference for ceding the stage to me for a period of time. I know that's a sacred trust. I'm building on a legacy here, a distinguished legacy, and I hope that my words do that well. I also want to thank everyone for the brevity of the previous remarks so that I don't have to be. Thank you very much on that front as well. You can see I'm not going to have a chance to speak about home today, but I'm quite pleased with what's happening there, and I would be happy in the Q&A session to talk more about that, or you can consult our website or Instagram if you'd like more information. Today I'm going to talk about radical modesty and how I've taken to challenging the conventions of patronage through architecture of humility. This talk is founded on 2 decades of experience working with the residents of extra-legal settlements, such as the one shown here, around the world, in order to realize and co-create much-needed creative work. The work, as mentioned, is facilitated by the International Design Clinic, a registered 501c3 that I created in 2006, give or take. Since its founding, I've had the privilege through the IDC, as mentioned, to co-create with my community partners over 24 projects on 5 continents, some of which I'll cover today, and some you can see on our website. However, before discussing these projects, I feel it appropriate to first acknowledge that although I stand here alone, the work you are about to see is certainly not created by me alone. Rather, it's the project and the product of an intensely collaborative address involving dozens, sometimes hundreds of different people. So it's great humility that I stand here before you today as an emissary blessed with the privilege of being a part of these efforts. I also feel it necessary to confess that the wisdom I offer today is born of lessons learned from 2 decades of experience, working in communities, doing experimental work, and the mistakes such experimental work naturally engenders. In hindsight, I've come to realize that the root of these missteps was my assumption that I might base my work on the patterns and practices of other humanitarian designers, such as Rural Studios, Architecture for Humanity, projects you see here, all of which are in turn based upon normative architectural practice. However, I've come to learn that this is simply not true. As my work progressed over the years, I found that normative architectural approaches simply do not work within the unique contexts where I operate, as evidenced by the condition of this Rural Studios project only a few years after its completion. The reason? The patronage-based practices used by many professionals, including engineers, architects, and planners, simply do not align with the practices, predilections, and supports found within extra-legal communities. Architecture through its history has been, and it continues to be, a service-based profession, dedicated to supporting the needs of patrons who can find value in and afford our services. The patron-centric nature of our work has had a profound impact upon us as practitioners, causing us to privilege linear and hierarchical processes, certain participant groups over others, and producing work capable of creating what Crawford and others have called symbolic capital. Now, although not without merit, these customs do become problematic when attempting to work within marginalized communities, efforts which require a much more dialogical process. To address these limitations, I've had to design patterns of engagement capable of cultivating equity instead of privilege, a mandate that naturally forced a critical re-examination of the prejudice embedded within my field, as well as in myself and everyone else that approached the work. Although this re-examination was founded upon varied sources, including developmental communication, viral propagation, crowdsourcing, and guerrilla organizational strategies, they are all intersected at one point: the communities where I operate. Each of these tactics are deployed in one way or another within my adopted context, communities realized through grassroots wisdom and authentic dialogue. Again, confession, this transition was not immediate. It was a long and sometimes painful process, occurring in small stages, as I, with my partners, took on various projects, each of which revealed minor inadequacies within the normative patronage-based approach that I assumed. This journey actually started with the very first project I ever took on through the IDC. The IDC was contacted, this is when we were in Lafayette, Louisiana, we were contacted by the Healing House of Lafayette, a group that provides pro bono therapy services for kids who had seen tragedy and couldn't afford these services without support. Every year, this group has a fundraiser where they invite 3 design entities, usually architecture firms, to design a playhouse. They then give each of these firms 4 weeks and $3,500 to complete this playhouse, and then they auction off the results. It's generally a very successful fundraiser for them, raising tens of thousands of dollars. When I broached this subject and talked at this time, I was teaching a class around guerrilla altruism. When I talked with my students about it, one student raised their hand and changed the course of the IDC forever. They didn't know they were doing that. But they raised their hand and said, what happens to the $3,500 if we don't use it? Meaning if we spend $3,000 and there's $500 left, who gets it? I don't think they were saying they wanted to get it. I think they wanted to figure out how it could benefit. So I called the Healing House, and the answer was, well, we do. So at that moment, the team decided to build the playhouse for nothing and to give a $3,500 donation before the auction even started. Now, this is obviously a high hurdle. How do you build something for nothing? An answer to this we didn't have. But I sent my students out, I went out, and we went around Lafayette, Louisiana, trying to find undervalued free resources that we could use to build the playhouse. There's a long tradition in Lafayette of lumber work. And so we were able to find lots of offcuts. Cabinet makers, lumber yards, everyone had piles of offcuts that some burned, some turned into mulch. None of them really recycled in any way. So we gathered all our pickup trucks, and again, everyone in Lafayette, Louisiana has one. And so we were benefited from that. And we traveled around grabbing every piece of wood that we could. We didn't know what we were going to do with this wood, and I had to convince my college and university that the giant wood pile behind the architecture building was fine and that we would deal with it. Eventually, we landed on a response, but the response is not what a traditional architect would do. It wasn't an elevation, a plan, or a section. It was, you know what we're going to do? We're going to drill every piece of donated wood at 6-inch intervals with a common drill bit. We're then going to get threaded rod, washers, and bolts, and we're going to knit this together. We're going to stitch this together, kind of a patchwork quilt of wood. Confession, we spent $400 on hardware. The IDC donated that, so that the $3,500 still went to the Healing House. And so we would have volunteers coming our way, asking to help. And they would say, like, we had a group from Virginia Tech coming in and like, hey, we're here for 3 days, let's help. Where's your floor plans? We don't have those. Where's your section, your elevator? We don't have any of those. But here, let me show you something. 2 pieces of wood, threaded rod, bolt, right? And we stitched the thing together, as you can see there, right? A giant wood pile with secret doors and passageways. And to show you how long I've been committed to this, the adventurous gentleman crawling through that trap door actually is an LTU student right now and sitting in this room. I won't embarrass him by pointing him out, but it's true. And he still has that adventurous spirit. It was interesting to put this work up amidst the other works by architects because they very much were like tiny versions of houses, which of course that's what a playhouse is supposed to be. And we rolled up with our wood pile right next to that. And there was a bit of head scratching until the kids came, and they quickly ignored all the other playhouses and filled ours. And the reason is because the other architects, by doing a mini version of their parents' house, had prescribed certain patterns of play as right and proper and certain as not, whereas we asked the kids to invent versions of play, to figure out new ways of playing. As a result, this raised $4,500, which was like 20 or 30% more than any of the other ones, in addition to the $3,500 investment, and set us on a process that embedded itself in scavenging, and that design would be based not on top-down approaches, but on bricolage, which I'll explain here in a moment. To define bricoleur, I'll cite Claude Lévi-Strauss, who traces the concept back to 14th century France, bricoleur, which was evident in billiards or in riding, where the horse might take an unanticipated path or a ball might frustratingly bounce in a way that you didn't anticipate. It was used to describe these unanticipated reactions to fixed and seemingly known settings. Strauss then posited that the bricoleur, who he characterizes as, quote, a devious craftsman, works in a similar manner, generating unanticipated outcomes using a pre-constrained set of resources, like we did with our chunks of wood. Since that time, Lévi-Strauss's ideas transcended its etymological and more metaphorical roots to become a much more universal concept, deployed to describe similarly inclined approaches in a variety of fields, including science, art, and technology. Even the internet itself and artificial intelligence have been described as technologies rooted in bricolage. As a result, bricolage is today positioned as an almost universal concept, deployed to describe activities and products that share 4 core attributes. First, all acts of bricolage must be constructed from a finite palette of secondhand parts. As such, they are always combinatorial in nature. Thus, the work's potential is linked to the number of resources gathered and the potential in each one, which foregrounds acts of experimentation in order to create new intention within these limited means. This approach, which is quite distinct from the processes used by the architect or engineer, have been used by generations of residents in extra-legal settlements to quickly uncover new potential within reclaimed materials, broken bits of concrete, blue plastic tarp, corrugated metal. Also within occupied sites and any other idiosyncratic resource that they might come across. They build entire communities out of this, cities actually out of this. Now, neither approach works perfect in isolation, and I can explain that in greater detail in the Q&A, but I am trying to be brief, actually. But this compelled me to find a suitable marriage between them, a union that I admittedly am still trying to perfect. It's important to note at this point another evolution prompted by this initial work, and that is multidisciplinarity. When I installed the call and even the class, it was a class with an ARC moniker at its front. I was recruiting architects because I, of course, was one, and we at our heart are all narcissists, right? And then an industrial designer knocked on my door and said, "Can I be a part of this thing?" And I said, "Well, I guess. I don't know what you're going to do, but sure." An interior designer came shortly thereafter. And the class soon filled with interior designers, industrial designers, architects. And they extended the conversation in marvelous, unanticipated ways. Since that time, the teams I take usually consist of many disciplines. On the work you're going to see, linguists, anthropologists, engineers, planners, computer scientists, graphic designers, all have been participants. And the work reflects the insight of those varied fields. Now, this questioning that I started engaging continued a year later when I traveled with a team of around 24 students, designers and engineers and architects representing 7 disciplines and 6 universities to Mumbai, India, to work with an Indian nonprofit called Mumbai Mobile Creches. Now, what happens in India on the construction sites is when the construction occurs, generally speaking, the construction workers can't afford to commute to those sites every day. It's far too expensive and it takes a few hours. So instead, the construction workers move with their entire families to the construction sites, where they occupy the edges of the construction site. They're hidden behind large corrugated metal at the edge of the site, a largely invisible population or community, which is quite odd. They're democratically invisible. They generally don't vote, which in India is kind of very, very weird, right? They're not seen. And when the construction is done, they just quietly move on to the next site. Mumbai Mobile Creches, now the one problem with this arrangement is that the parents can be distracted by their kids running around a construction site and potentially getting into mayhem or danger, right? And so Mumbai Mobile Creches steps in and talks to the developer and says, "Listen, if you give us a space, we'll run a school. And the school will allow the kids to have a safe place to play. But the school will also reverse a cycle of inequity that we see, where before the school happened, these kids didn't go to school. And so their future was pretty much preordained. They were also going to be on the construction sites. Now, because of Mumbai Mobile Creches, these students have graduated to become teachers who currently work with Mumbai Mobile Creches as well as others, lawyers, all sorts of others. So we were really eager to work with a group. LDC only works with groups that recognize that we are engaging cycles of inequity, not moments of inequity. That this is a trajectory that requires a long-term, tenacious commitment to begin to address. We don't solve problems because architects and designers can only solve trivial problems. We provide systematic address to make things incrementally better for communities that need that change most. So to work here, we started by first empowering those who knew the situation best to share their perspectives. We asked students to draw their schools. We armed kids with disposable cameras and asked them to photograph some of their favorite parts of the school or their homes or the community. We interviewed teachers, observed the school day, set up time-lapse cameras to document movement patterns, anything we could do to understand daily life in the creche and the community. From this, we came to understand that most important things facing these schools, at least to those working within them, had actually very little to do with architecture. We had been asked to design a school. That's actually not what was needed. What they needed were certain trappings of schools. They needed a school, I guess, broken up into atoms, right? Little bits. As an example, it became quickly clear that many of the kids in the school suffered from illness. Very hard to learn when you're vomiting. And this is because that although they had enough gas to boil the water that was consumed directly, they didn't have enough gas to boil the water with which they washed the dishes or washed the babies. And so they became sick. At the same token, they had a difficult time convincing developers to build these things that would be knocked down 2 years later, creating rubble that had to be disposed of, a big nuisance, right? The kids struggled with identity. They felt they were isolated, right? The teachers talked of kids like kind of losing focus. These became the cornerstones of our design response. A $2 water filter, a earth wall that was made from recycled componentry that at the end of the construction could actually be simply unfolded and the earth deposited back from whence it came. In fact, we found a bunch of indigenous plants that could be planted in the earth wall so that the earth over its 2-year duration could actually become cleaner, so that when you redeposited it, you'd actually served a positive function as opposed to leaving rubble behind. The big lessons within this project is that within extra-legal settlements, architectural componentry and effects, not necessarily architecture, may be the focus that's needed. This is especially true when the project contains a mandate for architecture's impermanence, as often occurs in extra-legal settlements. The second thing we learned is the importance of basing fabrication on existing businesses and tools. Shown here is a free space we created, these kind of folding play mats. We created this project in tandem with this and other auto rickshaw upholsterers. If you don't know, auto rickshaws are the motorcycles with the big butts that you sit in and motor really quickly through the city. It's a wonderful experience. I strongly urge you to take it. But the auto rickshaw upholsterers were super eager to work with us because they understood we were building a new business opportunity within this, right? And so finding those partnerships where everyone wins. A year or two after returning from India, I was invited to work with a Bolivian nonprofit which ran arts-based educational programming for kids living on the streets of La Paz. They wanted us to help them expand their programming from their traditional Sunday festival into something that could impact the kids throughout the week. Now, once again, to understand how to approach this, we gathered perspectives from everyone, hiring lustrabota or shoeshine boys to spend a day with us to tell us about their lives and how they worked, using various arts activities to understand the lives of the kids attending the events, deploying time lapses to understand movement patterns in the city, and even in charting every instance of marketplace in a city of 1 million people, legal or illegal, including when they were open, when it was sold, and the degree of permanence. In fact, that's me in the funny hat doing that exact activity. From this, we understood that any new educational program would need to be fit within the daily lives of the children, who simply did not have time to take a bus 45 minutes to school, spend 7 hours at a school, and then take a bus 45 minutes back. They had to work so their families could eat. And so we had to redesign school and redesign it in a way that fit into their lives rather than demanding their lives fit into the prescribed notion of what a school is. To do this, we started very small with a series of 20 postcards. You see one in the far slide, each of which offered a simple lesson related to arts programming or education. We subsequently printed thousands of these and allowed the children to take whichever ones they wanted, distribute them throughout the city, and we observed. We observed which cards were popular, which were ignored. They started to trade the cards, the kids did, kind of like Pokemon cards. And we observed which cards were really popular, right? And which ones didn't have much value at all. To understand whether it was the graphic design, the lessons learned, the topics. And then from these observations, we understood, wow, there are certain topics that are really important to these children. Surprisingly, photography was something that really resonated with them. Another was music. And so as we figured out what resonated with them, we invested more time, money, and material in those things. And you can see here basically a school that we deployed corner to corner based on the movement patterns of the marketplace. There's a kid playing it with reclaimed PVC pipe, right? And you see I actually traced, these are all incarnations of that music kit. The final one is actually based on the scaffolding of vending architectures common to this place, again, working with local craftspeople who know how to do this. What was interesting is that this one device, so we worked with a nonprofit who had volunteers, and volunteers may be free, but they're valuable, right? And so this allowed one volunteer to teach 4 lessons simultaneously, because you could pop 4 of these carts around different parts of the marketplace, and the volunteer could circulate around, and even when the volunteer was gone, the kids continued to play with the cart, challenging each other with games, drumming, doing other things. And so the architecture became a way of multiplying 4-fold the power of each volunteer. Now, big lessons in this project. First, the importance of empowering everyone to participate equally in the design process through accessible, sensible tactics. Second is allowing the work to grow over time, to earn size and complexity and cost in proportion to our understanding and conviction. And the third is the expandability of design. We started Bolivia going for 1 year with one nonprofit. We exited 5 years later having helped 10 nonprofits and probably a dozen different projects. And it was simply because they saw what we were doing, the communities we were working with. You know what? I see you're working with Lustroboto. You should talk to this German lady who runs a newspaper that's kind of an advocacy for that community. So we worked with her. Oh, and she said you should talk to these people, and you should talk to these people. Architecture and the work generated those opportunities. The next project that I would like to talk about is Mural Arts of Philadelphia, in partnership with Mural Arts of Philadelphia, a group that for decades has installed large-scale murals throughout Philly. Now, these murals are often within communities of need, the communities of disinvestment. And so they were really interested in understanding how the space around these murals might also be reconsidered. And so they reached out to the IDC. We were the first group they've ever reached out to, and we were very honored to be that, because this is a group that has a great deal of esteem within the city. But they wanted us to use our unique community-centered methodology to help them design and build a garden and outdoor classroom around this mural at Bodine High School. Now, we were immediately inspired by the fencing surrounding the school, the big black fence you see at the bottom, which was installed because the community would come onto the school grounds and do things that the people who ran the school didn't necessarily like. It might be skateboarding, it might be illicit activities, all nature of things. And so they installed this very large fence around a public land, around a public school. And we were very fascinated with this idea of like the public being kept out of these public assets and like the keys involved in that. And so the fence became this really interesting muse for us. But there wasn't a big budget for this project, so once again we had to figure out undervalued resources. And so we turned to the vacant lots that surrounded this school and were all over the neighborhood and started looking there. And we found a massive inventory of broken concrete, brick, little wood scraps, weeds, and fencing. And so we started to play with our newfound treasures, right? Not really knowing what we were going to do with them. And we turned our attention to, like, again, bricolage, conducting acts of hands-on experimentation using common tools, locally accessible methods. From this, we developed a number of innovations, including an approach to use common fence piping in 90-degree angles to create more complex geometries that provided greater structural integrity and programmatic elasticity. The project you see here is made of entirely 90-degree angles. All that happened is we changed the plane of rotation to allow for those 90-degree angles to begin to support each other and create much more strength within the project. It's interesting to note that this project, built as scrap in a public school, had to pass by the arts board, had to pass by the Philadelphia building officials, right? So we had to prove that a 300-pound person could do chin-ups at the end there and the thing would stand, and indeed a person could. Doesn't look like it, but it's an amazingly strong project. Every ounce of wood you see here was donated by the community. There's a big red piece up the top that was a church door. Again, we didn't steal the church door. The church donated the door to us. All of the plants which would one day fill this fencing and its kind of weird geometry, again, born out of the necessity to create greater structural integrity, all of those plants were cultivated naturally, weeds, but carefully curated weeds, I suppose. And this formerly privatized space became to take on a different function. And what I mean by that is, upon completion of this project, the community approached the school and said, would it be okay if we held a barbecue there? Would it be okay if, like, I have some plants that aren't weeds, could I plant those and help tend the garden? And so suddenly the fence, which had been a tool for exclusivity, became a welcome tool for inclusivity, right? Bringing people together. So the big lesson is potential transmittability of bricolage-based practices. It should be noted that this project was one of those that was hundreds. We had students from across Philadelphia. We had prisoners on work release programs that were a part of this. We had teachers. We had community members. Everyone was pitching in. But because it was a series of very simple methods using common tools to build this thing, everyone could learn very quickly and be a part of this, which led for potentially its widespread adoption and maybe propagation, a potential I'll unpack in the last project, which I'll talk about in a second. It also, the power of architectural construction to generate social capital. For architecture as an act to actually bring people together. We're a generous people. Like, you can look at any statistic you want, but the United States consists of very generous people. It might not be what you see in the daily news or whatnot, but we are, statistically speaking. And if you go to dinner, the first thing you do is, of course, what? Bring a bottle of wine, a bit of bread. No matter what you do, you bring something. And what's interesting with this project is I believe the community investment can trace itself back to that wood was all given by the community. It was this dad who had a bunch of wood in the garage, had been sitting there waiting for a special purpose, and we became its special purpose. And all of a sudden, they cared about the work because they were a part of it. And I think there's power there if you can fold that into the architecture. And it's a power we tried to unpack in South Africa. Last project I'll talk about today. Completed by a small team of 11 students, faculty, and professionals with backgrounds in architecture, design, and engineering. Working in partnership with local community members, this event and makerspace that you'll see in a moment was constructed almost entirely from scavenged materials, using only common tools and methods. The project at its completion was finished by a team of 11 in 10 days with a budget of $1,500. And it has since reverberated through the community, creating new partnerships, projects, and opportunities. Now, as is the case with all the work shown today, this project was the product of an intensely collaborative creative address based on persistent and emerging situations and undervalued resources. Doing so allowed our design team to align their motivations, means, and methods with those of the community, ensuring that those with whom they work would be actually better positioned to possess, evolve, and adopt the work long after we had left. For our partners who live and work within post-apartheid communities of incredible need, the rootedness and humble frugality of this work was not a nicety, but an essential attribute. For it is only through working within such limits that projects like this are able to shift from tantalizing one-offs to a physical and inspirational foundation through which our community might realize new works for years to come without external support. If I was spending $150,000 on this project, all I would be breeding is continued dependency on outside support, would I not? But if I'm spending $1,500 to harness reclaimed stuff and local methods, I'm empowering the community to take this on and build a whole bunch of other stuff without me being in the room. This $1,500 piece, since its completion, has actually done as anticipated, taken me 20 years to get to that point. The tectonic approaches developed through this makerspace have since been used by the community to build schools, homes, and other works using primarily reclaimed materials, while I and any of my teams were trapped in the US due to COVID. The work has thus become an empowering tool, allowing our partners to create new work for less time and money and support than previously possible. Well, the big lesson here, the centrality of found and scavenged materials, again, that's true, but the importance of what I'm calling now meme tectonics, and we're all acquainted with what a meme is, right? This easily transferable nugget of information that can kind of propagate almost without our will. How do you break architecture down into memes, or the essential attribute into memes? When constructing these works, it's important to note, again, we're not working with floor plans. Any kind of detail that we want transferred has to fit on an iPhone, because that's what the people have. Well, whatever phone, pick your favorite. I'm not going to be brand, like whatever. All right, I'm not an ambassador, but it has to fit on a phone, right? So like we have to break everything down into manageable nuggets of information, both so that we can build it and also so our community partners can take that knowledge and share it with their friends. So that after we go, they can build homes like this one, where this lady used to live in that home, now lives in that home, because one of our community partners took the methods and reclaimed materials we used, and while I was here in COVID, built that with her. We went back and just last year worked in a township, Walmer Township, one of the largest and poorest in South Africa, to develop a school, once again using reclaimed materials. In this case, we were really interested in trying to find more long span opportunities. Again, that would provide even greater opportunity for our friends abroad to deploy this to their ends. So with that, I thank you. Again, here are some of the meme tectonics, right? These little choice details that allow, that harness the potential of undervalued resources. With that, I thank you for your attention. I hope today that some of the work here resonated with people in attendance and built on the legacy of the conference. Obviously, it's not done. There's a lot left to do. But I'm still thrilled with the glimmers of hope I'm seeing in this and the potential there. And I'm excited to explore what they might mean in the next couple decades, if I'm given the chance. Thank you, guys. Q&A? Is there Q&A or not?
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes before we should break for some food. We're going to invite anybody who has any questions to ask them now.
Microphone, right?
Yes.
Do you want another one?
Yeah.
You do the 2-aisle thing? You just need to turn it on. I'll be very candid, I promise.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
There's a little tiny switch at the bottom. Yeah, almost invisible.
There we go.
Thank you. My question would be, maybe you have said it in the beginning, I missed that. Where did the idea of this philanthropy come from and combining that with architecture? And how would you suggest that this can be translated to other fields as well?
Wow, what a great question. So where did the idea come from? International Design Clinic stems from, I knew there needed to be a center to raise funds. I knew that the communities where we work, by the way, they don't pay a dime for anything. So that $1,500 I raised through the IDC, through individual and corporate donations, to fund the work, because the work's experimental. And so experiments have a chance of failure, and my community friends shouldn't be paying for my potential failure. And I also want my community friends to be able to invest their resources in the work that remains, to manage the school that we build, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew there needed to be a center. I knew I had an inkling. I called it International Design Clinic, not Architecture Clinic. I had an inkling. I didn't know how powerful multidisciplinarity would come. And I also didn't know that I'd be challenged into what is design. Like, can a linguist be a designer? Can an anthropologist, can a scientist be designers? And my answer is a profound yes, right? And the idea of clinic was just to be communicative with people that there are real needs within our physical environment. Unconfessed needs, there are real needs there. And so if I have a physical need, I go to a clinic. And so feeling away like, could there be something like that within the kind of creative practice? To be honest, like, I don't know, when I started this thing, I had no inkling of what it would become. I really didn't. Or of the position I would assume now. Like, bricolage was not even a thought. Viral propagation, none of this was. But I started with an openness, and I guess that's what I would advise. It's starting with an openness to understand you know very little. Like, you have the trajectory. I'm not saying you do, but like you generally, right? Know very little compared to what you will know. And you have to open yourself up to unanticipated trajectories as your work actually fails in some regards. The intelligence embedded in my latest work is built on the failures, right, or missteps of my previous work. And I think it's just being honest about that, and like also being open to unanticipated insights. I think that the student that like changed the trajectory of the IDC forever was like a sophomore. Like, I don't even know if they know, right, what they did. And so it's just being open as a faculty member to like insight from anywhere. Like, some of our greatest insights in the project in India came from like 6-year-olds. And when we handed them a camera saying like, photograph your school, and they didn't photograph what we thought they would, right? Which of course is the point.
Maybe time for one more question.
I am long-winded in my answers, sorry.
Professor Shaw, can you talk about some of the projects that you're currently working on?
Oh, what a great question. So I am about to go on a sabbatical. Thank you, by the way. And as a part of that, I'm taking a pause. So the project in South Africa just finished with the school I shared with you. And so I'm currently fielding offers. There's a group in Uganda that's interested in us coming and helping them, one in Mexico, another in Kenya. And I'm currently looking at these opportunities to see, like, there's no want of need, right? I remember once when I was at Temple and we were like, well, let's send we identified, I think, I wanted to go to South America because cheaper flights and no time zone shifts, right? So I kind of vacillate between Europe and Africa and then come back here in our time zone, and in India. And I wanted to go to South America, and we found a dozen amazing groups, right, that address cycles of inequity. One in Haiti that buried unclaimed dead, and another group in Mexico City that ran like schools on the landfills there, and like just amazing. Like I'll tell you this, like it is hard not to be humble when you're sitting next to the teacher that runs that school, who lives in a township in a home that's probably 400 square feet built of scrap, and she gave up 300 square feet of that to run a school for a decade, living in a 100 square foot bedroom in the back with her 2 children. And also, like, I get chills when I even talk about the students. Like, when I was a sophomore, you know, going through, I would never have thought, you know what I should do? I should drop about $3,000, and I should go to Africa for 3 weeks and help a bunch of people I'd never met before and will never see again, right? And if you can't be humbled and filled with a little bit of faith about what this country will be in the future, based on that, I think you're a little dead inside. We're in good hands. This generation that's coming, they got their heads screwed on straight in a way that humbles me almost every year. So, anyways, going back to what I said, we emailed all 12 of those groups. All 12 wanted us to come. And the hard part's saying no to 11, right? At the end of the day, we went with the group that had the greatest experience in the area, had a very clear agenda for us, had a very clear plan on how they would utilize the things they were asking us to take on, and it ended up being that project in Bolivia with the arts-based education. But I still don't know whether we should have said yes to another group, and I wish we could have said yes to them all, to be quite honest. And I anticipate and fear that I'll have a similar predicament in the next couple months.
All right, well, ask you to join me again in thanking Professor.
Thank you.
Back to Bujo for a few announcements about the luncheon.
Well, so the only announcement now is, you know, you're going back to where you did your registration. If you bought a luncheon ticket, you should go to the luncheon area. It's in the Blue Devil Cafe, which is right next to the registration desk. So thank you, everybody, for coming to this session.